and thank you for joining us for another episode of Hope for Healthcare with Dr. Katie Cole in partnership with ICD Healthcare Network. Dr. Katie Cole is a holistic physician, organizational well-being consultant, and change agent, working with industry leaders and proven strategies to heal our national healthcare system and our culture of medicine. Stay tuned to hear today's speaker.
Well, welcome everyone to Hope for Healthcare. This is a podcast in which we interview expert leaders around the country on best practices for healing our national healthcare system and our culture of medicine. Today, I want to extend a very warm welcome to Stephen Wolt. He is CEO of Veritus Solutions. Stephen's own personal journey as an executive in corporate America struggling with substance use disorder as well as recovery from this is the reason that he set out to create Veritus. His struggle for years trying to manage a career and his own treatment and recovery made him realize that additional treatment resources were needed for executives who are highly functional in the workplace. His goal is to bring together industry leaders in clinical treatment, executive coaching, and healthcare coordination to create a virtual outpatient treatment program specifically designed to meet the needs of medical and legal communities. Well, welcome, Steve, and thank you so much for being on Hope for Healthcare today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
And do you prefer we call you Steve or Stephen? What would you prefer?
Steve is fine, unless you're going to reprimand me, which I hope you're not going to have to do during this call. So,
oh, no, not today.
That's Steve. Not today.
All right, great. Well, Steve, can you tell us our audience a little bit about your own personal journey with struggling with addiction and how this helped to inspire you to create your organization?
Sure. It's great to be here. It's also great to be filming this, 2 days before Thanksgiving.
Oh.
And I just think about how grateful I am for my life today, how grateful I am for my wife, and how grateful I am for the work that I do. And there's something about this week that I reflect about where I once was and where I am today. And that injection of gratefulness is just wonderful. And I'm feeling that today being on this call with you. So I'm in long-term recovery as a cocaine addict. And, as you mentioned, I'm the president and co-founder of Veritus, which offers tele-health solutions for impaired physicians and impaired lawyers dealing with substance use disorders. And the genesis of the idea really was a function of my own experiences as an executive in corporate America with a very significant career, but also a very significant cocaine addiction and sex addiction. And so, my story in a nutshell, what brought me to this point was, I had a very large career in New York, and in 2004 started developing a very significant drug addiction and sex addiction, and the two working together was so difficult and so challenging. And, I had done a bunch of residential treatment programs. I'd go away for 30 days to the best care that I thought was available to me. And then I would re-enter my work and re-enter the home. And I would just struggle with putting together any type of abstinence. And I did that for years. And I bottomed out really horribly in 2008. I ended up losing the business I had, and it got really dark and really ugly, and multiple drug overdoses, and I'd really hit a bottom, and I had become suicidal, and I'd really had I didn't see a way out, and I was acting out in ways sexually that were just so confusing and shameful. I was abusing large amounts of cocaine, and but for the grace of God, I found a treatment program in 2009 that specialized in childhood trauma, and
wow.
And it saved my life. And so many of the experiences that were the driver of this trauma I wasn't even aware of consciously. So I found a place. I went there for 4 months. Place in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, an organization called Pine Grove, and more specifically a program called Gentle Path that they had there. And really that was the turning point of healing in my life. I had significant childhood trauma, both physically and sexually. And if I, without addressing that, the drug and alcohol was but a symptom of some much deeper, darker issues that I had to address. And the HELP program helped save my life. And I relocated from New York to Los Angeles, where I had some friends that were very active in 12-step communities, especially with Alcoholics Anonymous, and as well as Sex and Love Addiction Anonymous. And I share that because there's still so much stigma around these addictions. And my experience from hell to back, and my story is my gift. And if I could do anything on this call for anyone that's listening, is to right size some of these issues and to help destigmatize some of these issues. And so a few years ago, I had gotten back to my old career, and I started reflecting on my experience as an executive in corporate America and the outpatient treatment model for substance use disorders and mental health. And I just saw some glaring issues and some glaring barriers that I thought were problematic for accessing treatment. And those issues were, it was a very non-private experience going to and from an outpatient treatment facility. I was living in New York and Los Angeles, and the whole experience, I spent more time commuting to a treatment facility than actually in treatment, given the traffic of New York and Los Angeles.
I believe it.
And I just found that there were these incredible residential treatment programs around the country. But as you transition back home into the outpatient treatment model, I saw a big drop off. And especially in, the idea of receiving treatment with peers, right? People that have such similar personal and professional lives, where residential treatment really did a good job creating that type of exclusivity. But as you transition to the outpatient world, it was just a big drop off. So I really wanted to give back. I wanted to use the experiences that I had in my own journey with addiction and recovery, most of which were horrible in nature, but to find a way to create something that I thought could make a difference. And we did this all pre-COVID, by the way. And so
wow, that was great timing, by the way.
Great timing. And so I had met a gentleman in Alcoholics Anonymous in 2009. His name was Bob Miller, buddy of mine. He is the chairman of the board of Freedom Institute. Freedom Institute is a large New York nonprofit outpatient treatment provider, been around for almost 50 years in Midtown Manhattan, an amazing, prestigious institute. And I went to Freedom Institute and to Bob and shared some of these ideas. And we decided to create a company called Veritus, where we were going to do our best to take what was being done so good at Freedom Institute in person and shift it to a telehealth platform where we can use peer programming, where we can provide higher levels of confidentiality and convenience. And we can really integrate the best of coaching and the best of clinical on one team from the first day of treatment. So right before the pandemic, we launched Veritus Medical, which is a telehealth intensive outpatient program for impaired physicians. And the rest is history, as we like to say. And we did well throughout the pandemic and growing the business. Earlier this year, we brought the two organizations together, and I became the president of Freedom Institute, as well as the president of Veritus, which is just personally pinch me. How did I end up here as the president of Freedom Institute? So it's just some days I just have to scratch my head and say, wow, I was basically dead in 2009. I had lost all hope to live. I were engaging in sexual behaviors that were unfathomable. I was ending up in emergency rooms with drug overdoses. And here I am today, president of Freedom Institute, and also creator of a telehealth treatment program for impaired licensed professionals, nothing short of spectacular. So, I think about Thanksgiving and gratitude and my life today, which is really amazing.
Wow, Steve. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for being so vulnerable with our audience and sharing your own personal experience. It's definitely challenging and hard to talk about those things. I know I have a history of childhood trauma I've been open about, and it's really interesting how when we have unresolved childhood trauma, how that can manifest for people. And with you, it manifested in addiction and some unhealthy sexual behaviors. And just the fact that you were able to get you found the right team to work with, the right treatment program, and then you recognize the gap in outpatient treatment, you were able to create something beautiful for our community. And, I am sad for the journey that you've had, but I am also grateful that you've had the experience and the wisdom to create what you've created.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine tell me recently, she goes, Steve, you are so uniquely qualified to help others.
Most
And I have to remind
definitely.
myself of that,
Yes, absolutely. And it means so much more when we've had the experience ourselves and we're in a more of a mentoring, teaching, leadership role. I think it lends weight to itself. And when we are hopeful, I think that our clients and patients and colleagues, it has a deeper level to it, because if we have been able to turn our own life around and we are hopeful that everyone can too, it means a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. I reflect sometimes, and I think like the one thing I did is I never gave up. And there were so many years where I wanted to get sober and I just couldn't. And failure after failure after failure. And I just never gave up. And I told someone recently that, listen, I might be a lot of things, but I am the Michael Jordan of never giving up. And, I think that's also inspiring for people that might be listening today and struggling, that the one thing, we just don't give up. And someday, somehow, something will change. And that just a little bit of belief within oneself, a little bit of hope is enough to kind of get me through the day and get anyone through that day. And maybe tomorrow will be very different.
Well, Steve, can you tell us a little bit about Veritus Solutions and how
Yeah.
a little bit more about the platform and
Yeah. So we created Veritus initially for impaired physicians. And one of our other partners is Dr. Michael Sucher. Dr. Sucher ran the Arizona Physician Health Program for over 30 years. So he's literally overseen the care of thousands of physicians that have been dealing with substance use disorders and mental health issues and trauma. And he really planted the seed in my head that over the 3 decades that he worked in monitoring physicians, he felt that about a third of those physicians would have been better off with an outpatient treatment program that allowed them to continue to work, allow them to continue to stay in the home, allow them to continue to earn income versus going to a residential hospital type of setting for extended periods of time. But the outpatient treatment model was just not set up to work with an impaired physician. So we went to work in creating Veritus, which is an intensive outpatient program that it consists of 10 hours of clinical treatment a week over a 12-week period of time. And so a few things about I think if I talk about the Veritus 5, right? What is it that makes us unique? And so number one is peer programming. So especially with licensed medical professionals and impaired physicians, the challenges that doctors and healthcare professionals deal with on a day-to-day basis are so unique to healthcare professionals. So receiving treatment with your medical professional peers is so valuable from an empathy and understanding and connection point of view. And typically only a residential treatment model could facilitate that. So number one, receiving treatment with your peers to help reduce or right size stigma and shame, so valuable. Number two, within the intensive outpatient program are weekly healthcare professional work-related issues groups that deals with professional burnout, professional boundaries, dealing with monitoring, dealing with stigma, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, compassion fatigue, really a platform that we've created and a syllabus we've created over 12 weeks that really addresses so many issues that doctors in particular are experiencing these days. So that's part of the treatment program. The third thing that is really unique is that we actually integrate physician coaching into the IOP. And so in 2019, I went around the country trying to find physicians who are in long-term recovery and who are open about their recovery and who are credentialed or certified as coaches. And I put together a team of physicians that provide coaching for our physician clients. So they're part of the clinical team, they meet with clients weekly, and they provide coaching. And really interesting, that coaching, just by way of background of these physicians, ends up being a blend of coaching, both recovery, performance, and executive coaching, given where they've been in their own personal lives. So such a unique part of the program, helping not only to higher levels of accountability, creating inspiration and hope that there is a path forward. Look at me as an example. But doctors in particular come with us with lots of challenges in their life, whether it's their career, whether it's their license, whether it's their family, and having that coaching component is really unique. Or we offer, and the clinical program is based on dialectical behavior therapy. So we're a DBT-based program. So over the 12 weeks, it's the lifeblood clinically of our program. We are teaching medical professionals the skills of mindfulness, emotion regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. And what a unique moment in time in healthcare to be teaching these skills. They're practical. Medical professionals are highly educated, so they grasp on to learning new things. And we've just had such a positive experience using that. Also, DBT has been proven to be very effective in treating substance use disorder and trauma. So we have found in our program that our clients have really benefited from being taught these DBT skills. And lastly is telehealth. Now, we were one of the first, if not the first, to go to market with a telehealth intensive outpatient program. The whole world now has embraced telehealth out of necessity due to the pandemic. But we have a methodology that has worked really well in that we keep our groups small, right? So within our program, you'll have no more than 8 clients at any given time in this type of Zoom setting. The groups will be co-facilitated by 2 clinicians. It just lends itself to a much more engaging experience, and also holding clients kind of accountable for participation in these groups. And over the past few years, both Veritus and Freedom Institute, we've had a really positive experience using telehealth. And here's what the data supports based on the work that we're doing, but also supported with other large treatment centers as well. So we have seen higher levels of client engagement. We've seen higher levels of client and clinician satisfaction. We've seen clients stay in the program longer because of the ease and convenience that telehealth provides. We've seen about the same rates of abstinence proven by third-party drug and alcohol testing. So we've also seen clients be more honest in this platform than in person, which is also really interesting, whether they feel that it's safer to kind of tell the truth in this environment. But, over the past few years, the feedback from our clinicians had been significantly higher levels of honesty in this platform versus an in-person experience, which in early recovery or any type of therapy is always useful to be honest with your therapist. So we believe it's here to stay. I'll tell you what's challenging though, and upsetting and sad. There are high rates of substance abuse in our nation for the pandemic. There are lots of studies that support higher rates of alcohol or drug abuse during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So when we design this, I had really thought that the higher levels of confidentiality that telehealth provides would just open the door for physicians in particular getting the help they need, because it was just more confidential. They weren't, and more convenient. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that type of client in our programming. Most of the people we work with have been mandated to treatment and get referred to us from state physician health programs or state nurse monitoring programs, where they are mandated to do treatment in order to keep their license or continue to practice. And so we've done really well in that market. Where we haven't seen lots of interest is the physician or healthcare professional who's voluntarily seeking out treatment for a drug or alcohol problem. And so I do think there are still many barriers that exist where medical professionals feel safe enough to get treatment for a substance use disorder. And so still a lot more work to do to kind of connect with those markets, still so much more work to do to help reduce the barriers where medical professionals feel safe enough to get the help they need.
So Steve, let me ask you a question. If I'm, let's say I'm an ER physician and I'm struggling with a little bit of alcoholism since the pandemic, and I recognize I'm drinking to really self-medicate now and get through the days. And let's say I have a history of, childhood trauma too, and it hasn't been something I've dealt with. How do I begin getting connected to your organization, and how do I know that it's confidential and it's not going to be reported to my hospital, to my mental?
Yeah, great. So number one, clients have HIPAA rights. So we don't have the ability to share your medical information without the individual authorizing us to do that. Okay. We are also not mandated to report a physician if they are seeking out treatment. So there are two parts of this process that provide safety and security to get the help they need. It's also very interesting, oftentimes, our program may not be appropriate for someone. So a lot of times people come to us that are not coming from a monitoring program, whether it's a physician voluntarily or a lawyer or judge voluntarily, where they'll come to us and get assessed, and we'll make the determination of, okay, is intensive outpatient an appropriate level of care? Sometimes people need higher levels of care to be medically detoxed or residential treatment, or maybe this is too intensive a program. Maybe there's something else that may be more appropriate for that individual based on maybe underlying psychiatric issues or concerns. So we go through a pretty intensive evaluation where we'll work with someone up front and help them determine what is the appropriate level of care, what is the appropriate treatment provider, and sometimes it's not us. And, we're in a position to refer people to more appropriate levels of care based on what's actually going on.
And what is the intake process like? Like if I'm an ER physician and I call you, how would that work?
The intake process, it's, from that phone call, it's confidential, right? So that's number one, to feel safe enough to kind of, hey, what's going on? And then, we would schedule an assessment or an evaluation. And that really is like a 2-hour meeting with someone on our clinical team that will do a deep dive in what got you to this moment in time, hopefully with the intention of working with either a diagnosis. Is an intensive outpatient level of care the appropriate level of care? If not, what is? And is our programming the most appropriate given exactly what's going on with your situation? So that's like really good information for us as a treatment provider to see if we are the best provider to meet this individual's needs. It's also really good information for the person on the other end, really getting an independent evaluation as to what should next steps look like here.
Okay. All right. Well, that's really helpful, Steve. And I sounds like you have many layers that help, protect confidentiality and buffer that. So I know that's really great to hear. And I look forward to helping you market this program, because I think really every hospital organization should have access to this information.
Yeah, and it's, you think about how many physicians or hospital executives or healthcare professionals are struggling out there, and you look at the numbers of people actually getting help, it's really sad.
Yeah.
And people out there are suffering, and they're scared, not knowing what type of care is appropriate, but where is it safe enough for me to kind of ask for help and get for help. So the more that we can do to help reduce those barriers, I mean, we're saving lives.
Oh, absolutely, Steve. Well, I have another question to kind of deep dive into a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned, your own struggle with childhood trauma and how you found a program in Mississippi that really addressed that for you. And that was actually probably the root cause of some of your addiction. And I'm curious, how do you address childhood trauma in your own program with Veritus and the Freedom Institute?
Yeah, it's interesting. Our primary treatment is for substance use disorder and mental health. All of our clinicians are trauma informed. All of our coaches have training in trauma. So in a scenario like that, we would probably bring in outside help that would really specialize in trauma work, whether they do that work during treatment or post-treatment. Sometimes it makes sense to stabilize an individual before you do that kind of deep dive into that type of trauma work. It's so interesting. When I went away to Mississippi and started doing that work, it was just fascinating how much is available to do that type of work. And, I remember doing EMDR. And
Can you
I remember
explain that for our audience?
and it didn't work well for me, to be honest with you. Eye rapid, kind of tapping into parts of the brain to trigger, childhood experiences using light and noise to kind of trigger both sides of the brain. But what really worked for me, which was really interesting, and I poo-pooed it when I first started, was art therapy. And so I was like, guys, I'm paying so much money for this treatment and you're giving me crayons. Like, are you serious? And what was so interesting, there were so many of those experiences that I was not conscious of. And, they had me drawing with my non-dominant hand, listening to certain types of music, and so many experiences, emotions, came to the surface. So I walked away from that experience, as difficult and challenging as it was, just kind of spectacular in nature, the work that the resources that are out there for people to get the help they need.
Well, I actually love that you share that, Steve, because I think, trauma healing is so individual and unique for everyone. And like you said, EMDR or hypnosis, or may not be work for someone, but art therapy or even Reiki energy healing can be helpful, mindfulness, meditation. So I like that you address that aspect to trauma healing.
Yeah, and within our IOP, we do virtual psychodramas. So as it relates to DBT skills, so things come up there from a trauma perspective and the work that we do there. But if someone's coming to us with significant amounts of trauma, there are resources we would refer them to either during treatment or post-treatment to get that type of help.
Okay, great. And Steve, how long is the program? You said, is it 10 weeks?
It's a 12-week program.
Okay.
With the ability to work with people, for up to a year primarily, where they can continue to work with their coach, with their therapist. There are weekly groups that they can participate in. So really supporting them throughout the first year of recovery.
Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah, I was going to say that it's great that you've got the more intensive portion in the beginning, and then the ability to stay on with one-on-one coaching and peer coaching for the year.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Sometimes people continue to work while they're doing their IOP. Sometimes people take time off from work to do treatment. So there's enough flexibility with the telehealth and the morning programming where someone could potentially do both. Sometimes it's a lot in early recovery to do that intensive amount of treatment and continue to work. But about 50% of the physicians that we're working with are continuing to work while doing treatment.
That's great. And that's really very unique too, because I think a lot of physicians think they're going to have to take months of time off. And then how do you explain that to your team when you're understaffed? And what do you say is going on? So I think the ability to integrate the treatment into being able to still work, maybe cut back hours a little bit for your own self-care, but still be able to work, and then integrate the principles that you're learning along the way into the reality of your life. As a psychiatrist, I think that's really important.
It's really interesting. We have a bunch of psychiatrists in our program. And so you just think about how difficult it is for a psychiatrist to go to a local treatment program where they refer their clients.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, so we've got a bunch of psychiatrists who have been clients of Veritus because of the higher levels of confidentiality, and because accessing local treatment providers is extremely problematic to their own private practice. And so we see a lot of psychiatrists come to our program as well.
Well, that I'm really glad to hear, especially for my own colleagues, and we're there for them.
You also see a lot of burnout in the psychiatrist space as well. During COVID and post-COVID, the need for their services are in such high demand. It's so interesting. We were wanting to bring on an additional medical director to Freedom Institute, and we're talking with a bunch of addiction psychiatrists that schedules and practices are so full right now, just not having any available time to do anything other than what they're working on. It's pretty incredible.
I believe it, Steve.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think we're only going to see more mental health need, as years go on, because I think it's a combination. It's good because the word is getting out, and I think we're addressing stigma a little bit more in our country. So I think people are more willing to come in to get the help. But yeah, I agree. I'm really grateful that you exist, Steve. And I'm so grateful that you're here with us today and telling us sort of the ins and outs of your program and explaining the confidentiality piece too.
Yeah, the one thing I'll throw out there also, first and foremost, I'm a person in long-term recovery. And if anybody listening to this wants to reach out to me confidentially and just share what's going on, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a Veritas situation at all. You want someone safe to talk to. All I can say is, I get it. I've been there. For some reason, the universe has saved me and put me in a position here to help others who have struggled the way I've struggled. And that's my way of giving back. And so if someone just wants to have a conversation, so interesting. I share about the sex a lot more these days than years ago, for a variety of reasons. Number one, there's still so much stigma around that. Number two, I'm in a spectacular marriage with an incredible human being, and so living a beautiful life sexually. And number three, what usually happens is when I talk about it, I get that phone call from someone that's just, struggling watching porn and not knowing what to do, someone that's acting out compulsively and nowhere safe to turn to talk about these issues. And something, these are debilitating conditions, but there are tremendous resources out there, not only for abstinence, but thriving in that area of your life at some point in time. And that's where the hope is, right? I was a hopeless human being in that area of my life. And my life today, the marriage I'm in right now, the unconditional love I have from my wife, is so spectacular in nature. So I have healed and I'm thriving in that area of my life. So anybody listening to this wants to have a conversation, not as to me as the president of a treatment provider, but just like guy in recovery around this issue, call me. I'd love to talk.
Oh, thank you, Steve, for offering that. And yes, our audience, if you're wanting to reach out to Steve, I'll make sure I post his information underneath the podcast, so you have the way to contact him confidentially. And Steve, thank you again just for being vulnerable with us and sharing everything that you've been through, because it definitely is it's a blessing for us that you've had that experience and you can be a beacon of light for us. Yeah.
Great to be here. And I'm so, once again, I know our time's coming to an end, but it is Thanksgiving, and just a great reminder of gratefulness for where I am today and what I get to do today to help others. So,
well, thank you for being with us here today, Steve. And again, I'm so grateful for you and appreciate the time and energy that you've given to us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll be in touch soon, and I will be posting everything on social media, LinkedIn, and Steve will also have his own bio page on my website. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks.